Hi there, my name is Juji. Welcome to my channel. This is a space for anyone and everyone who's interested in exploring relationships and personal development through the human design system. Today I want to talk about Queen Elizabeth, who passed away a few days ago. I'm sure you've heard. So I wanted to take a look at her chart and sort of give a compare and contrast of whether or not she was living out her design, living out her true potential as herself. So here is Queen Elizabeth's chart. She was a projector. She was a 5-1 profile with emotional authority, split definition, and she was on the left angle cross of wishes. There's a lot to say about Queen Elizabeth, especially since her life has been so well documented. I have to admit that most of what I know about the royal family, I know from movies and the show The Crown on Netflix, but I have heard that it is pretty historically accurate, so I'm going to use the things I know about the royals through that show to showcase and make certain points about what I see in terms of Queen Elizabeth's design. So let's start with the fact that Queen Elizabeth is a projector. And the interesting thing about looking at a chart in terms of what it reveals is that actually she is born to be a leader. She is a born leader. And it's hilarious because actually leaders as we know them today are usually elected. And she was not. She was born into the royal family. This role was thrust upon her in a lot of ways. Most people feel like it was prematurely so because her father passed away as she was in her early 20s. And she had a lot to shoulder and has gone through a lot of different phases in front of the public eye. So as this projector, she was very well recognized in terms of being a leader, but a lot of it is very symbolic. As far as I can tell, the royal family is an emblem and a symbol for the British people and in the world, obviously. But they're not really here to make new policy. They're not really here to guide energy. And so I'm sure that that was something that Queen Elizabeth struggled with. She could see the inefficiencies. She could see how government was maybe not being run the way she would run things, but there wasn't really anything she could do about it. However, she is a 5-1 profile, so people projected all sorts of things onto her. Namely, that there was something she should be able to do about how, the prime minister ran things. And I know that there was definitely, she had meetings with heads of state. She definitely interacted with lots of elected leaders all around the world. But whether or not that actually had some sort of consequence is a completely different story. So I want to talk a little bit more about this 5-1 because as a heretic, she is somebody who felt in a lot of ways like no matter what she did, she wasn't doing the right thing. If she was too outspoken, that was going to be the problem. If she wasn't outspoken enough, that would be the problem. If she expressed one opinion, they would have wanted the opposite. So there's like no real winning as a heretic in that sense. It's like people are projecting onto you that you're somehow here to save them in crisis situations. And so the best that she could really do is that when some major world event happened, or like when something was happening specifically in England, she would at first go on the radio and then eventually on television. And she was sharing with the nation words of comfort in order for people to basically feel better. There there was nothing that she could do to change what was happening. She could only offer her condolences in times of strife. She could only really give people something to hope for in terms of, better days to come. And I also want to point out in this context that she has gate 31 in her chart. In fact, her throat is very defined in her chart, and 31 specifically is about influence. So her words and her expression did have influence throughout the world, throughout history. Whether or not you approve or disapprove, there was influence there in terms of how she expressed herself and what her words were able to accomplish. So, like I said, she was a born leader, even if her leadership was a little bit more behind the scenes than perhaps she would have liked. And something that I saw a lot of in terms of the, criticism brought against her is that she was very tight-lipped about a lot of things, especially when it came to things happening within her own family, especially things that had to do with emotion. And being an emotionally defined person, this is actually pretty common. So one would expect that if your authority was emotional, then you would be just this ball of emotion constantly, either crying or being really happy. And she was kind of neither in the public eye. And so people, not to make any silly puns, but they called her the ice queen. She was so guarded with her emotions. And this is actually pretty typical when it comes to emotional authority, because you learn from an early age that when other people are receiving your emotions, especially as a fifth line, that it's too much, that it's overwhelming for them, and your emotions have no place in government. I feel like that was exactly how, the Crown sort of portrayed this, in terms of her just having this understanding that she's just here to keep calm and carry on. Being non-reactive was her best friend, and she really ran with it. And in fact, I'm going to do a separate video on Princess Diana and Charles and that whole thing, but I feel like this was especially contrasted with Princess Diana, who was all about being very forthcoming, being very warm, being very very expressive when it came to her emotions. And the contrast of that was really pretty stark. And that is when the British people sort of sat up and paid attention to the fact that here was this other woman who might be queen someday, and she was so in touch with her emotions, and this other woman clearly wasn't, according to them. Now, what's interesting is actually Princess Diana was also an emotional projector, but like I said, I'll get into that in the next video. So yeah, this is what I really see at first glance about Queen Elizabeth. I also want to point out that she is a split definition, and the way that that is interpreted within oneself a lot of the time is that you're always trying to get your life together in some way. If only you could have this or figure this out or reach this goal, you would have the perfect life. This is how your mind interprets the split. And so, Queen Elizabeth was accused a lot of the time of being a little bit controlling in terms of what went on behind closed doors. And this is potentially part of this split wherein she's like, well, I'm expected to do X, Y, and Z. There's this projection field on me. I'm a projector. I see, what the next step is, and the one after that, and the one after that. So the way that this family is going to get it together is if I do my duty and follow the rules and, behave like I'm supposed to. But then, of course, other people are involved. And that's where things kind of went awry, is her trying to control those in her orbit. It never quite worked out the way that she wanted. The example of Charles and Diana and getting them together is a big one that sticks out for me. Obviously, these were things that she needed to handle as her royal duties. So it's not necessarily that the split was making her do it, but I'm sure it didn't help. I'm sure it didn't help the way that she felt about what her duties were as queen. And the thing that's interesting or contrasted in her chart, because somebody actually asked me not long ago, like, are there things in a human design chart that seem to contradict each other? Yes, there are. And in this case, her logic process seems to contradict her emotional process, right? People who are here to be, to follow their emotional authority are here to listen to how they feel and not what they think. That is the foundation of emotional authority. But she has this very specific kind of logical process. Her channel 63.4 and her 1762 are all about making logical conclusions based on having more information, right? So the logic process starts with asking a lot of questions and getting to the bottom of things. She is a first line underneath it all, so she is an investigator. She was constantly being, given every newspaper that the country published, and getting all of these different sources of information to give her all of the facts. And then she has this channel of structuring, which is all about coming to conclusions and expressing them through this very well-defined throat. But again, she's here to really tune into her emotions, which obviously were not something that were honored in the royal family. I mean, we don't honor emotions in general in society. We feel like they get in the way a lot of the time, and we have this such high regard for the mind in terms of its decision-making capacity. So there is this contradiction in her chart between her emotionality and her logic, and it seems to me that her logic won out most of the time. There was also times when she was being accused of not reacting fast enough. So this emotionality that needs time to process, and this logic process that also needs time to go through its various stages, were a hindrance to her being a reactive person. Not to mention, she was probably used to being non-reactive as somebody who was here to be this stoic, like symbol of solitude and poise. So she was accused of being non-reactive, but that was what she was taught to do from the beginning. So it was this contradiction, and I'm sure there were times when she felt like, man, I just can't do anything right. Like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. And that's the role of all these sort of royal symbols in terms of like the monarchy still being around. But especially as a 5-1, I'm sure she felt that very, very deeply. Finally, I just want to go through, her open centers, starting with the open ego, which is a primary dilemma for her. Everybody with an open ego has a journey of understanding that you're not here to prove anything to anyone ever. And unfortunately, that's all she was being pushed to do all the time. She was being pushed to prove that she was worthy of this crown, that she, as a woman, could handle the stress and the strain of being such a public figure in the world. And so, you know, I can see that she enjoyed life's simple pleasures. I understand that she liked to hunt. I understand that she liked the outdoors, and she had the things that she did to escape that. But I'm sure that there was a lot of internal strife going on in terms of feeling like she wasn't ever succeeding. You know, the signature of a projector is success. And when you feel like you're not succeeding as a projector, when you feel like a little bit helpless in your circumstances, that can lead to a lot of bitterness, a lot of resentment. Not to mention, she had an open G center, which is the identity. And, you know, people with an open identity center a lot of the time feel lost in their lives. You know, never mind that she was handed this role at such an early age, but then on top of that, to feel like everybody's projecting onto you that you're the hero and the savior and that you're here to do this role and telling you who you are. I mean, how intense would it be if you are not here to know yourself and everybody just keeps calling you the queen? You know, at the end of the day, she was just a person. At the end of the day, she was still a human being. So to represent so much to so many people, with this open G that's wide open, actually, it must have been quite a trip. And she has this open spleen, which, you know, the not self theme of that is holding on to things that are no longer serving you. I feel like in this case, the way that I see holding on to things is like holding on to the stoicism. You know, never, never, never letting anybody see beyond the facade. That takes a lot of self-discipline. I recognize that, and probably a lot of energy. But when people were really wanting to see emotion from her, when they really would have expected her to show emotion, she was still holding on to this persona that she had built. And I personally believe that she could have benefited from, you know, rolling with the times and kind of softening into someone who was maybe a little bit more relatable. Who knows? Finally, the open sacral, obviously, as a projector, she doesn't have sacral definition. And not knowing when enough is enough. You know, it could be very grueling being a royal. It can be very overwhelming with the travel and with the constant entertaining of world leaders. Like, this isn't just like some run-of-the-mill garden party that she's having. She's having like full-on banquets all the time. And just, you know, having her daily duties, I'm sure that took a toll. I'm actually really impressed that she lived to be 96 years old because, you know, that, especially as such a small person and somebody who ended up being quite petite and frail as an older lady, it's a lot that was being expected of her, and probably less so towards the end of her life. But still, I mean, that's quite a life that you lead, being all over the world for many, many years and never really having any downtime from that. That must have definitely been exhausting for her. Absolutely exhausting. So, you know, hopefully this gave you a little bit more insight into who Queen Elizabeth was. I personally didn't have too many feelings about her one way or the other. I just found that looking at her chart gave me a lot more to chew on in terms of understanding her life from like a higher perspective. So let me know if you have any questions about this. I would love to answer them for you. If you liked this video, please press the thumbs up and hit subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram at HDbyZ and find me on the website. The link to that will be in the show notes. There you can see that I offer human design readings, a mentorship program for relationships, and a community for conscious women. Thank you so much for being here. I really enjoyed this. Have a great day and ciao for now.